Hey guys, tonight we travel back to a sunny-baked island in the Mediterranean, where the sea glimmers like molten silver and the hills hum with ancient wind. You're not just walking into a palace, you're being born into one. But don't get too comfy. You're arriving in the Kingdom of Sicily in 1194. And trust me, it's not all lemon groves and lullabies. In fact, your very birth is a political earthquake, and your family tree has more daggers than branches. Picture this volcanic smoke curling from Mount Etna in the distance, nobles whispering behind heavy velvet curtains, and a baby boy who's already upsetting the balance of power across Europe. That's you. Welcome to the world. Frederick, your enemies are already lining up. Oh, and there's a decent chance you won't survive your own childhood, let alone become one of the most enigmatic rulers in medieval history. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive in Jesse, a sleepy town nestled within the boundaries of the Kingdom of Sicily. The winds whip across the Adriatic, and your mother, Constance of Sicily, is in labor, an older woman by medieval standards, and the last living legitimate heir to the Norman kings who once ruled this land, to silence the whispers that she's too old to give birth. She allegedly delivers you in public, right in the town square. Sounds dramatic, maybe. Historians still argue whether that tale was propaganda or paranoia. Either way, the message is clear: this baby is real. And this baby is royal. Your father is none other than Henry VI, son of the infamous Barbarossa, Holy Roman Emperor. He's iron-willed, ambitious, and about as warm as a snow-covered sword. By marrying Constance, he's expanded his reach south into Sicily, a jewel of a kingdom soaked in Arab, Norman, Greek, and Latin influence. It's a cultural kaleidoscope. And you, little Frederick, are now its hinge. But you don't get long to rest. Within 4 years, your father dies, possibly of malaria, leaving you heir to 2 thrones before you've even lost your baby teeth. Constance, fiercely protective and politically sharp, seizes the moment. She ensures you're crowned King of Sicily at the tender age of 3, and then, perhaps knowing the chaos to come, she dies the very next year. You're now an orphan with a golden crown and a very big target on your tiny back. At this point, Pope Innocent III steps in. He declares himself your guardian, not out of affection, but strategy. Sicily is wealthy, and controlling you means controlling it. So while other toddlers are learning their first words, you're being shaped into a papal pawn. Your childhood is spent under the protection of papal agents, who rotate you through safe houses, monasteries, and fortified castles. You learn early that trust is rare, silence is safer, and books are your best companions. Oh, the books. Unlike most medieval monarchs, who can barely scratch their names, you're reading early, absorbing languages like a sponge. Latin, Greek, Arabic, even Hebrew, they flow into you, like streams feeding a river. You grow up surrounded by scholars, clerics, and curious exiles, each adding to your mental library. One friar teaches you astronomy using bronze spheres and parchment charts. Another shows you how to identify birds by feather, shape, and flight style. And let's not forget the court jester who probably teaches you sarcasm, because you'll wield that like a dagger in your later years. Meanwhile, the island buzzes with power struggles. Norman nobles grumble about German influence. Local lords test your authority by stirring up bandits or blocking royal taxes. Everyone wants to know, what kind of king will this boy become? Charlemagne II, Zero, or another forgettable name carved in dusty marble. But already, there are signs. You watch, you listen, you absorb the squabbles of governors and the sighs of peasants. You walk Palermo's narrow streets, where Muslim calligraphers copy Greek philosophy and Jewish merchants haggle over ivory combs. You're growing up in one of the most cosmopolitan crossroads of medieval Europe, and it's feeding your imagination like nothing else. Still, the threats loom. Bandits might slit your throat. Assassins might poison your milk. Some noble might accidentally drop you down a flight of stairs. Even the Pope, your supposed guardian, tightens his leash every time you look remotely independent. But here's the thing: you survive, not just by luck, but by learning how to bend, how to charm, how to make people forget you're dangerous until it's too late. Quirky tidbit: there's a legend that you kept a pet monkey as a child, probably brought in by Arab traders from North Africa. The monkey supposedly imitated your tutors, throwing scrolls and chattering when they scolded you. True, who knows? But the image fits a precocious boy with a throne, a monkey, and a mind sharper than the swords guarding his bedchamber. By the time you reach your early teens, you're already a strange, glittering hybrid, half German ruler, half Sicilian scholar, wholly unreadable. Everyone's projecting their hopes or fears onto you. The barons want a puppet. The Pope wants a servant. The people want peace. And you just want to rule. But on your own terms. And beneath it all simmers something dangerous. Not rage exactly, but a kind of volcanic patience. You're not loud. You're not rash. But like Etna, smoldering on the horizon. You're biding your time. The world doesn't know it yet. But you'll soon become the most fascinating, feared, and misunderstood emperor of the 13th century. You're 14 years old, which, in medieval royal math, it means it's time to start acting like a full-grown king. But while most teenage boys are thinking about jousts or awkward crushes, you're juggling something a little heavier, the Holy Roman Empire. See, while your mother made sure you were crowned King of Sicily, there's still that other crown hovering out there, the one your grandfather Barbarossa wore, the one your father died trying to hold on to, and now it's calling your name. The year is 1208. The German throne is in chaos. Two rival kings, Philip of Swabia, your uncle, and Otto of Brunswick from your rival Welf family have been battling it out, splitting the empire in two. When Philip is suddenly murdered over a family feud involving a cancelled wedding, of all things, the balance tilts. Otto becomes sole king and eventually Holy Roman Emperor. Problem solved. Right, not kite. Otto, to the surprise of absolutely no one, breaks all his promises to the Pope and starts grabbing land like a medieval game of Monopoly. This sends Pope Innocent III into a righteous frenzy, and guess who the Pope turns to for help? You, his former ward, his golden student, his secret ace. So, at 15, you're invited to become king of the Romans, that is, the elected heir to the imperial throne. You ride north from Sicily, with a small entourage and big nerves, knowing you're walking into a mess of loyalty oaths, assassination rumors, and chilly German castles. The journey is brutal. Bandits stalk the roads. Local lords demand bribes to let you pass. Food runs low. At one point, you reportedly disguise yourself to sneak through hostile territory. Whether or not that's true, it sounds epic enough to include. You're halfway between prince and fugitive, rolling toward destiny with nothing but a papal endorsement and a few loyal knights. By 12, you reach Germany and start charming the nobility. You're young, cultured, and bilingual Latin for the bishops, German for the barons. Unlike Otto, you actually listen when people speak. Your hair is longer now, your robes more imperial, but underneath it all, you're still the observant, multilingual boy from Palermo who knows how to read a room better than most grown men. That Christmas, in the city of Mainz, the German princes elect you as king of the Romans. You're crowned with ceremony, trumpet blasts, and cheers. But the crown doesn't come with a pause button. Otto still holds the imperial title, and civil war looms. So you get to work. Your base of power is shaky. Your coffers are nearly empty, and you're technically, not even legally old enough to rule. But you start forging alliances, marrying off nobles' daughters, granting privileges to cities, and promising reforms that'll make the empire great again without putting it on hats. It's a balancing act between charm and ruthlessness, and you walk it with unsettling grace. You also send letters, lots of letters, in elegant Latin script. You write to princes, popes, abbots, and kings. Some you flatter, some you threaten. All of them are impressed. One bishop calls you the wonder of the world. Another whispers that you're too clever for your own good. By 1215, Otto is excommunicated, outmaneuvered, and ultimately defeated at the Battle of Bouvines, a French-led smackdown that flips the imperial chessboard. You're now the only serious candidate left standing. Quirky detail, during this whole crisis, you still make time to debate philosophy with theologians and request Arabic manuscripts from Spain. While most kings are debating sword lengths, you're busy translating Aristotle. Scholars still argue whether you were a true believer or just using knowledge as power, but either way it works. Finally, in 1220, after years of maneuvering, you're crowned Holy Roman Emperor in Rome by Pope Honorius III. The ceremony is lavish crimson banners, golden icons, chanting clerics, the whole holy 9 yards. But even as the incense curls around you and the imperial regalia weighs down your shoulders, you can't ignore a curious thought. Who's really in charge here, you or the Pope? This tension, this push and pull between spiritual authority and imperial power will haunt the rest of your reign. Back in Sicily, things are shifting too. Your old southern kingdom isn't just a footnote, it's your laboratory. You begin crafting a state unlike anything in Europe. A place where laws are written down, where judges are trained, where Muslims, Christians, and Jews can, at least theoretically, coexist. You invite scholars from the Arab world, fund medical translations, and build libraries. You love falconry so much you write an entire book about it, De Arte Venandi cum Avibus, still considered one of the greatest bird hunting manuals in history. Your court becomes a center of learning, filled with mathematicians, poets, and astronomers. Even the architecture starts blending Gothic arches with Islamic geometry. But don't be fooled. This isn't some utopia. You enforce your laws with a cold edge. Rebels are crushed. Taxes are ruthlessly collected. And if someone challenges your reforms, well, they don't tend to last long. You're not trying to please everyone. You're trying to build a state that runs on logic, not feudal chaos. And yet, even now, you're still underestimated. To the Germans, you're the Sicilian. To the Pope, you're useful, but suspicious. To the rest of Europe, you're either a dazzling intellect or a dangerous heretic. Maybe both. But you've survived assassination plots, papal guardianship, royal elections, and a rival emperor. You've crossed mountains, recited poetry, debated theology, and charmed cynical nobles. And you're only in your 20s. One scholar writes that you are stupa mundi, the wonder of the world. The title sticks. And while the world watches in awe, you start planning something far more ambitious than any crown or conquest, an empire that obeys the mind. Not just the sword. You don't sleep much these days, not with the empire calling from one side and Sicily whispering from the other. Every candle in your study seems to burn twice as fast. Every scroll seems twice as thick. Welcome to your 20s, where you're not just emperor. Now you're the architect of something completely new. It starts with paperwork, not glamorous. Maybe, but you believe that the strength of a ruler isn't measured by how many swords he commands, but by how many laws he can write that actually make sense. In 1231, from the sunlit chambers of Melfi, you produce something Europe hasn't seen before, a full legal code. It's called the Liber Augustalis, and it doesn't care who your grandfather was, what castle you were born in, or how many sheep you own. It's one law for all. Clear, written, enforceable. You basically invent the modern civil state centuries before anyone else thought it was cool. The new laws ban private warfare. Nobles can't just ride off and settle arguments with axes anymore. Judges must be trained. Tax collectors must account for every coin. You even regulate the grain trade to stop people from hoarding during famines. And yes, there's a curfew. Sorry. Nights. No more late-night brawls at the tavern. But don't mistake order for kindness. Your law code is precise, but it's sharp. Punishments are severe. Appeals are limited. You establish state prisons. And they aren't comfy. It's justice. Yes, but justice on your terms. Fair. If a little terrifying, your kingdom of Sicily becomes a testing ground. Palermo buzzes with scholars and clerks. Monasteries keep records in triplicate. Arabic mathematicians work alongside Christian architects and Jewish doctors. You issue royal edicts in multiple languages: Latin, Greek, Arabic, sometimes even Hebrew. Your empire is like a giant chessboard, and you're playing 3 games at once with both hands and a falcon perched on your arm. Oh, yes, the falcons. If there's one indulgence you allow yourself, it's birds. You adore falconry with the kind of passion some people save for their children. You breed them, train them, study their habits. You even fund a royal aviary where birds are treated better than most peasants. Your book, The Art of Hunting with Birds, is more than a hobby project. It's a scientific treatise that blends observation with reverence. You don't just love falcons. You admire them. Fast, precise, regal. You probably see a little of yourself in their golden eyes. Back to politics. Though, the Pope is watching all of this with increasing suspicion. After all, emperors aren't supposed to be this. Competent. You're centralizing power, streamlining justice, and worse, doing it without the church's permission. You're also allowing Muslims to live openly in Lucera, their own walled city under your protection. They worship freely, serve in your army, and even hold minor government posts. To Rome, this looks like heresy wrapped in silk robes. So you play a balancing game. You exchange letters with the Pope, full of flowery Latin and polite shade. You swear you're a loyal son of the church, even while quietly ignoring every single demand. Historians still argue whether you were deeply religious or quietly secular. But what's clear is that you never let faith override reason. Meanwhile, you push education. In 1224, you found the University of Naples, not for monks, but for civil servants. It's a radical idea. You're training people not to pray harder, but to govern smarter. These aren't philosopher kings, they're clerks, judges, and analysts. Your own sons attend. So do bright young minds from across the Mediterranean. A quirky note: you demand your students dress modestly and avoid flashy colors. No crimson, no gold, no peacock feathers. You want brains, not drama. Though, you being you still wear a crown covered in sapphires shaped like stars. Your reforms spread beyond paper. You regulate weights and measures. You inspect bakeries to stop bread fraud. You fix corrupt coinage and try to rein in feudal tax abuse. You're basically the IRS, the FDA, and the Supreme Court, rolled into one suspiciously well-dressed man. And yet, not everyone is impressed. Nobles grumble that you're cutting into their traditional rights. Bishops fume that you're treating church land like public property. Rome grows more uneasy with every edict. To them, you're acting more like a Muslim sultan than a Christian emperor. You don't help things by keeping a harem and a cadre of astrologers. You even have a court jester, who's also your personal spy. Say something foolish near him, and guess who hears about it by morning still? The people, especially in Sicily, tend to like you. You bring order. You fix roads. You send doctors to plague villages. You might be strict, but you're fair. And after decades of chaos and war, fair feels like a luxury. You also travel constantly. You don't hide in castles. You ride through your realm, inspecting towns, questioning judges, sometimes showing up unannounced, just to see if things are running properly. In a world where most kings rule from behind walls, you show up on horseback, mud-splattered and sharp-eyed, asking awkward questions. You are becoming, quite literally, the center of your empire. Every coin bears your face. Every legal decision echoes your codes. You create a bureaucracy so dense and efficient, it will still be running a generation after your death. Historians today still debate how much of this was genuine reform and how much was ego-driven control. Were you laying the foundations of a modern state, or just making sure no one could ever defy you? The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. But for now, you sit atop a functioning, multicultural kingdom run by laws and ledgers. Sicily is humming. Germany is quiet for now. The Pope is grumbling, but not yet excommunicating. And your birds are well fed. You've become more than emperor. You've become a symbol of order, intellect, ambition, of what a ruler might be when he's not just crowned by the church, but crowned by his own sharp, curious mind. And yet, you can already feel the winds shifting. Whispers from Rome, rumors in Lombardy, a crusade brewing on the horizon. But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight, the lamps in your study glow gently. Scrolls await your review. Your falcon sleeps nearby, head tucked beneath a wing. And you, Frederick II, still barely 30, are just getting started. You ride with a kind of confidence that doesn't come from muscle alone. It's the steady pulse of someone who knows the world bends, just slightly, to their will. And today, it bends toward the east. It's the year 1227, and the word on every bishop's lips is crusade. The Sixth Crusade. To be exact, Jerusalem has been lost for decades. The Holy Land cries out for a new holy army. And guess who's supposed to lead it, you? Of course, you made a solemn vow to go. Twice. Once to Pope Honorius III, and again to his successor, Gregory IX. The world expects it. The cross has been sewn onto your cloak. Preachers are rallying crowds from Cologne to Calabria. Papal banners flutter. But you're still in southern Italy managing laws, training falcons, and dealing with Sicilian logistics. And then the Pope loses patience. In September of 1227, as you prepare to sail from Brindisi, disease sweeps through your fleet. Your men collapse with fever. You fall ill too, coughing and burning up, unable to stand. A few advisors whisper that it might be poison. Others think it's just your body finally rebelling against your impossible schedule. You cancel the expedition temporarily and send word to the Pope. Gregory IX does not take it well. While you're still recovering, lying on a sun-bleached pallet in Apulia, the Pope drops the spiritual hammer, excommunication. Again, that's right. You, Holy Roman Emperor, are declared outside the grace of God for missing your boat. Historians still argue whether this was politics dressed as piety. After all, plenty of kings had delayed crusades before, but none had dared build such an independent kingdom. Challenge church authority and maintain close ties with Muslim subjects. The Pope sees your delay not as illness, but insolence, a public slap in the face. You respond like only you would, by going on crusade anyway while excommunicated. In 1228, against the tide of church disapproval, you set sail. Your fleet, sleek and glittering, cuts across the Mediterranean. No mass army this time, just a small, strategic company. You land in Acre, shake the dust off your boots, and begin the most unorthodox crusade in medieval history. No Zegas, no charging knights, no rivers of blood. Instead, you send letters to the Sultan of Egypt. Yes, really, you write to Al-Kamil, Saladin's nephew and the current ruler of the region. You've exchanged messages before discussing philosophy, astrology, and the occasional sarcastic jab. The Sultan respects you. You speak Arabic. You know Islamic law. You once debated imams for fun. So rather than storm the gates of Jerusalem, you negotiate. Over a few intense weeks, your envoys meet with the Sultan's court. You make promises. So does he. Neither of you trust the Pope, but both of you want stability. And somehow, it works. On the 18th of February, 1229, you walk into Jerusalem, not behind a conquering army, but, under a treaty, the city is returned to Christian hands. Not all of it. The Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa remain with the Muslims, but the Church of the Holy Sepulchre opens its doors to pilgrims again. It's a miracle of diplomacy, a triumph of brains over blood, and it makes everyone furious. The Pope, predictably, is livid. You achieved peace, but without his blessing, without his soldiers, without his cross. Military crusaders resent you too. You've robbed them of glory, of plunder, of heroic martyrdom. They call your treaty cowardice, in disguise. Even in Jerusalem, your triumph is muted. You crown yourself in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, but there's no bishop willing to bless you. The ceremony is quiet. A golden crown, a few advisors, a falcon, probably still excommunicated. You leave Jerusalem within days. No one's quite sure what to make of it. You went. You won. You walked out. No holy war, no massacre, just a deal, just peace. You return to Italy in 1230 and are greeted not as a hero, but as a problem. The Pope, still brooding, tries to stir revolt in your lands. Armies clash in southern Italy. Cities burn. But eventually, even Gregory IX sees the political storm blowing too hot. A treaty is signed at San Germano. You are welcomed back into the Church's good graces. For now, but nothing's quite the same. You've broken the mold. Crusading, ruling, even worship, none of it follows the old paths anymore. You've done the unthinkable, won Jerusalem with diplomacy, not blood. It won't be enough to secure it forever. Of course, it will fall again decades later. But for now, peace holds. A fringe but fascinating rumor from the time some claimed you were secretly planning to convert to Islam. They pointed to your respect for Arabic scholars, your refusal to desecrate mosques, your allowance of Muslim prayers in Jerusalem. One chronicler even suggested you performed ablutions in the style of a Muslim ruler. Is any of it true? Historians still argue. Some say it was slander from church enemies. Others hint at a more complicated, curious spirituality, one that doesn't fit neatly in any doctrine. You, after all, famously called Moses, Christ, and Muhammad three impostors in one furious letter, though whether you meant it is another debate entirely. So, what does the world make of you now? To some, you're the Antichrist, a secular emperor wrapped in velvet blasphemy. To others, a Renaissance man born too soon, a chess master playing 10 boards at once, a heretic, a genius, a menacer, a miracle. But you just returned to your palace in Palermo. You sit beneath a painted ceiling of zodiac signs, sip chilled rosewater, and stroke the feathers of a gyrfalcon. You've seen Jerusalem. You've baffled the Pope. You've rewritten the rules. And you're not even halfway through your reign. You wake up with sunlight streaming through a stained glass window, gold and crimson shards, lighting up the room like a dream, painted by logic and fire. But there's no time for awe. You have laws to write, heretics to question, and a kingdom to fine-tune, because now, in the 1230s, your crusade is behind you. The Pope has forgiven you for now, and you finally have breathing room to shape your empire the way you always wanted, with order, elegance, and the precision of a scholar sharpening a quill. You start with Sicily. Why Sicily? Because it's yours. Entirely. It's your laboratory. Your canvas. Your favorite chessboard. And unlike the fractured German duchies up north, this island kingdom lets you test every bold theory, every imperial itch for control. So you roll out the constitutions of Melfi in 1231. It's a massive legal code, hundreds of laws packed into Latin pages that will echo for centuries. These aren't just petty rules, they're a full reboot of justice, governance, and power. Want to carry a weapon, not without a license. Want to accuse your neighbor of sorcery, better bring evidence. Want to start a private war? Absolutely not. There's a fine, a jail cell, and possibly a gallows waiting for you. You've outlawed trial by ordeal. You've declared the king's court supreme, and, in one of the boldest moves, you put royal inspectors, Missi Dominici, on the road to check on local officials. If someone's abusing power, they report it straight to you. Historians still argue whether you did this for justice or just better control. But either way, the result is extraordinary. A centralized, literate, modern-sounding legal state, centuries ahead of its time. And the scholars, you bring them too. You invite jurists from Bologna, mathematicians from Andalusia, translators from the East. Your court becomes a melting pot of minds. Jewish, Christian, Muslim. If someone's clever, you make room. In fact, you're so fond of diversity, you do something that practically makes the Vatican faint. You build a university. Not just any university, the University of Naples. Founded in 1224. And this isn't a sleepy monastery school. It's a place where imperial ideology is taught, where future administrators and lawyers get trained to think the Frederick way. Here, you're not just a king, you're an architect of thought. You even standardize medicine. That's right, doctors in Sicily can't practice without a license. They need to pass an exam, complete a course of study, and follow ethical codes. Sound familiar? That's because it's basically the model for modern medical regulation. And you did it in the 13th century. But even in all your legal brilliance, you don't forget the visuals. You commission buildings with Arab domes and Roman arches. You mint coins with your face in Roman imperial-style laurel crown and all. You choreograph your power, like an artist staging a ballet. And your palace, your palace in Palermo isn't just a residence. It's a statement. There are mosaics in Greek style. Lions carved like something from Baghdad. Marble halls, cooled by fountains. And golden ceilings patterned with stars. You even build a throne room without a throne. Just space, light, silence. As if to remind everyone you don't need to sit to be in command. And falconry, yes. Falconry gets its own book, because you're not just obsessed with governance. You're obsessed with nature. So you write the De Arte Venandi cum Avibus, or the art of hunting with birds. It's part science, part poetry, part imperial flex, illustrated by your own hand-picked scribes. The book details bird species, anatomy, training techniques, even ecological observations that wouldn't be confirmed for centuries. It's not just a manual, it's a medieval field guide written by an emperor. A quirky tidbit. You once sent a letter to an Arab ruler requesting a giraffe. Not for war, not for diplomacy, just curiosity. Send me the creature. You wrote, that walks with the sky. Your thirst for knowledge is so vast that you keep astrologers on your payroll. Regularly quiz your advisors with trick questions. And even organize a weird little experiment you instruct that 2 infants be raised in total silence to see what language they would naturally speak, hoping to uncover the language of God. They didn't speak anything. The experiment failed. The ethics, questionable. But again, it wasn't cruelty. It was something else. A need to know, to understand. And all the while, you publish law after law, not from a dusty scriptorium, but from your saddle. You're constantly traveling, inspecting roads, tweaking customs duty, mediating land disputes. Your scribes follow you, like a literary military unit, churning out decrees as fast as you think them. You're both feared and admired. You tax nobles harshly, but let peasants appeal directly to the crown. You clamp down on bandits, but preserve ancient aqueducts. You're a paradox wrapped in parchment. So, what does this mean for the empire? It means that, while other monarchs are still trying to remember where their borders are, you've built a government with eyes, ears, and laws that speak with your voice. You've turned your rule into a kind of music, structured, layered, and unmistakably your own. Sure, the German princes grumble. The Pope still fumes. But down here, in the sun-drenched streets of southern Italy, you've carved out something close to sovereignty. A world where a falconer emperor can pen scientific treatises by moonlight, where Muslim engineers help design Christian churches, where justice doesn't depend on noble blood, but royal paper, and every part of it, every law, every coin, every scroll whispers the same quiet message: you are the state. You're standing at the prow of a sleek Mediterranean galley, sun on your face, wind snapping the imperial banner behind you. The water's calm, but your thoughts aren't. You're not here for a joyride. You're on a collision course with the Vatican again, because no matter how many treaties you sign, how many letters you write in elegant Latin, the Pope keeps accusing you of being the Antichrist, which, frankly, seems a little dramatic. But let's back up. You've just returned from crusade, technically a successful one. Jerusalem was handed back through diplomacy, not bloodshed. You entered the holy city barefoot, with the solemnity of a monk and the spine of a general. And yet, the Pope still excommunicated you. Why? Because you were late. You had the nerve to get sick and delay your departure. And that was enough for Gregory IX to call spiritual foul. And even after you took Jerusalem without lifting a sword, he still refused to lift the ban. So here you are, emperor of half of Europe, ruler of Jerusalem, and yet barred from the sacraments like a common heretic. Naturally, you're furious. And so is the Pope. He accuses you of heresy, atheism, and yes, sleeping with Saracen women in your palace. Which, okay, you might have, but was it really his business? You retaliate not with prayer, but propaganda. You launch one of the earliest and most aggressive information campaigns of the Middle Ages. You commission fiery manifestos, circulate public letters, and rally scholars to your cause. These aren't dry decrees, they're literary throwdowns, complete with insults, theology, and plenty of subtext. One pamphlet even calls the Pope a usurper of the apostolic throne. Another compares the papacy to the Pharisees who condemned Christ. Historians still argue whether you actually believed this or just found it politically convenient. But one thing's clear, you're not backing down, and neither is Gregory. In 1239, he excommunicates you again, this time for allegedly conspiring with Muslims against Christendom. You respond by threatening to march on Rome itself. Armies gather. Words fly. Europe watches like it's the main event. Your letters are legendary. In one, and you write, "We are the light of justice. He is the father of lies." Another time, you remind the German princes that the Pope has no right to crown or depose emperors. It's the prince's right to choose their ruler, not the Vatican's. That one sends shivers through the Curia. And then, in true Frederick style, you double down, not just with armies, but with symbolism. You revive Roman imperial iconography, statues, coins, inscriptions. You start referring to yourself as the World Emperor, Stupa Mundi, or Wonder of the World. The papacy wants a humble, obedient king, and instead they get a Renaissance man 4 centuries early, riding falcons and quoting Aristotle. Meanwhile, you host debates in your court. Muslim scholars, Christian bishops, and Jewish rabbis argue metaphysics while your secretaries take notes. You're not afraid of heterodoxy, you invite it. One fringe tidbit: you reportedly kept a Quran in your private library next to your copies of Cicero, Augustine, and Galen. You're not trying to burn the church. You're trying to outgrow it. And while theologians panic, your secular reforms keep rolling. In the South, your administration hums like a machine. Roads get paved, ports reorganized, taxes streamlined. You're not just fighting for a throne, you're building a modern state in an age of feudal chaos. And that terrifies the papacy. Because if the emperor doesn't need the Pope's blessing, what does the Pope control? Things come to a boil in 1241. You intercept a council of bishops on their way to Rome, literally arrest them mid-journey. The Pope furies. You suggest maybe the next council should be held in Sicily, under your supervision. That's like inviting the IRS to a dinner party and then asking to audit their taxes. But then, the unexpected, Gregory 9 The skies crackle with tension. Rome sinks into panic. No pope means no official moral high ground. And you write a calm letter to the cardinals, promising safe passage for their conclave, as long as they behave. You've bought time, but not peace, because your excommunications, your boldness, your sheer refusal to play by the medieval rulebook, have alienated parts of Europe. France and England eye your empire warily. Some of the German princes grow twitchy. And worst of all, the papacy isn't done with you yet. A new pope, Innocent IV, is elected in 1243. At first, he seems willing to negotiate. You send envoys. He responds in kind. There's a flicker of hope, but it burns out quickly. In 1245, at the Council of Lyon, Innocent makes the most radical move since Canossa. He deposes you, not spiritually, not in theory. He declares you unfit to rule. He invites Europe to rise against you. He calls you a servant of Satan and tries to install rival claimants in your place. And this time, it's not just a symbolic slap. It's a declaration of war. But you're not done yet. You rally your armies, your poots, your diplomats. You tighten your grip on Sicily, reinforce your castles in Apulia, and publish another round of open letters, some in Latin, some in German, some even translated into Arabic. Because make no mistake, you're not just defending an empire, you're defending an idea that a ruler can be learned, curious, autonomous, that politics doesn't need to bow to theology, that a man with a crown can speak 9 languages and still write love poetry in the margins of his law books. By now, your enemy don't just fear you. They don't understand you. They call you godless. But you quote scripture with more precision than half their priests. They call you decadent. But your laws are stricter than any monastic rule. They call you foreign. But your roots stretch through Germany, Italy, and Jerusalem. You've become a mirror, one they don't like looking into. And through it all, you hold the line, not with crusades or miracles, but with parchment, policy, and sheer intellectual will. Because if God's kingdom must wait, then yours, earthly, golden, rational, will do just fine. You wake to the sound of scribes scratching quills, the distant toll of cathedral bells, and the faint rustle of Mediterranean wind across your Sicilian palace. Outside, hawks circle lazily above lemon groves. Inside, you're building an empire, not just of land, but of law, because war is messy, and popes are exhausting. But rules last. This morning, you're reviewing the latest draft of your legal code, the Liber Augustalis, also known as the Constitutions of Melfi, a thick, crisp tome that smells faintly of parchment glue and ambition. This is your answer to centuries of feudal disorder, a complete legal overhaul. A tiri, rational lattice of statutes and consequences. You're not just ruling by sword, you're ruling by signature. No more barons with private armies. No more sheriffs taking bribes. No more church courts doing whatever they want. Under your law, all power flows from the center from you, and that center is humming. Sicily, under your reign, is one of the best administered states in Europe. You have full-time bureaucrats, permanent royal judges, notaries with salaries and office hours. The streets are patrolled, markets are regulated, even forest preserves are catalogued, tree by tree. Historians still argue whether your reforms were meant to protect the common folk or simply tighten your grip. But either way, they work. Need a marriage annulled? Fill out a form. Want to appeal a murder charge? There's a process for that. And unlike most medieval monarchs, you actually enforce it. Your empire starts to feel different. Sleek, clean, paper-bound instead of blood-bound. But even as you sharpen your legal scalpel, the old world resists. The church isn't thrilled with your secular judges. The nobles aren't thrilled with your tax audits. And peasants, well, they're just trying to survive another barley harvest. Still, you press on. Your law code is written in Latin, but also translated into Greek, Arabic, and Hebrew, because your kingdom isn't culturally homogeneous. It's a mosaic. Sicilian Christians, Muslim artisans, Greek merchants, and Jewish physicians all jostle under your rule. You govern them not as tribes, but as citizens. That's pretty revolutionary for the 13th century. One fringe detail, your palace staff includes Muslim eunuchs who act as chamberlains, interpreters, and even diplomats. Some of your Christian nobles whisper about infidels in high places. You smile politely and ignore them, because in your court, talent trump dogma. You're also an education nerd. You found the University of Naples in 1224, not for monks, but for future civil servants. You want loyal, literate administrators trained in Roman law, philosophy, and math. Bonus points if they're fluent in 3 languages. Students grumble about the food and tuition, but the curriculum is decades ahead of its time. And you don't stop there. You issue decrees on public hygiene. You standardize weights and measures. You even attempt to regulate medical practice, requiring doctors to pass exams and register with the Crown. Imagine trying to run a DMV and a CDC in medieval Sicily. That's your Tuesday. But there's also a poetic side to all this bureaucracy. You collect rare books. You write verses in the Sicilian dialect, planting seeds that will eventually blossom into modern Italian. Your court becomes a literary incubator, attracting poets like Giacomo da Lentini, who's rumored to have invented the sonnet under your roof. So yes, you're a micromanaging control freak, but you're also a Renaissance man who showed up 250 years too early. And still, because life can't be too tidy, you've got rebellions to deal with. The barons in Apulia mutter about their lost privileges. The cities of northern Italy aren't thrilled with imperial oversight. And back in Germany, the princes keep doing that thing where they say they support you, but definitely don't. You send letters, threats, a few armies, but you also send laws. Clear, precise laws with your personal seal. Because if swords win battles, statutes win centuries. Your bureaucrats wear dark robes and carry ivory writing kits. They draft laws in candlelit rooms while outside. Soldiers train and crows argue over olive pits. Sometimes you think about the ancient Roman emperors Hadrian, Augustus, Trajan. You wonder if they felt like this surrounded by chaos, determined to impose order, not with gods or charisma, but with paperwork and policy. It's not glamorous, but it's lasting. One strange day, you conduct an experiment. You take a group of infants, place them with mute nurses, and order that no one speak to them, not a word. You want to discover the natural language of humanity, Hebrew, Latin, Arabic. Turns out, it's none of them. The babies die. A cruel and haunting failure, but one that underscores your obsession understanding the roots of society. Language, justice, power. You crave knowledge, like a knight craves victory, and your empire becomes an extension of that craving. Every road surveyed, every tax recorded, every law written down with neat precision, as if that could keep the future in place. But of course, it can't. Outside your perfectly organized southern kingdom, the papacy continues to fume. Rivals plot, and your own son, your heir, starts to wonder what kind of shadow he'll inherit. But for now, you lean over the map of Sicily, quill in hand, and draft one more ordinance. It's about beekeeping, because even emperors need honey. You wake to the scent of fresh pine and damp earth. Far from the polished halls of Sicily, the Alps loom above, jagged and imposing. As you lead your army northward to claim your imperial crown in Germany, the air is thick with anticipation and the metallic clang of armor. Your horse stomps impatiently while courtiers adjust their embroidered cloaks, and banners flutter in the cool mountain breeze. This is no simple parade. The political chessboard is sprawling and dangerous. German princes eye you with suspicion, while the Pope watches from Rome, a wary hawk perched on the papal throne. You know that to unify your vast empire, you'll have to juggle diplomacy, war, and the fine art of patience, which, let's be honest, isn't your strongest suit. Historians still argue whether your pilgrimage north was a show of strength or a desperate bid to shore up legitimacy in fractured Germany. Either way, you command respect, red beard, glinting beneath your iron helm, eyes scanning the horizon like a lion hunting its prey. Among the more curious companions on this journey are your Syrian archers. Their exotic curved bows, contrasting with the bulky European crossbows wielded by your knights. Their exotic gear earns sideways glances, but you appreciate their precision and cool-headedness in battle. Multiculturalism on horseback, medieval style. Meanwhile, the townsfolk whisper stories of your legendary temper. One tale tells how you once threw a knight into a river for suggesting you pause your march for a rest. Barbarossa doesn't tire. You mutter, a smirk playing on your lips. The army marches on, driven by your iron will and the faint hope of a united empire. But it's not all grinding marches and stern orders. At a roadside tavern, you indulge in a rare moment of laughter, sampling local ale, while listening to a minstrel's ballad about Charlemagne, your imperial ancestor and occasional role model. You chuckle at the tune's dramatics, secretly wondering if your own legend will someday rival that of the great emperor. Tensions simmer as you near Aachen, site of your impending coronation. Rival nobles sharpen their knives, figuratively for now, vying for favor, power, and influence. You know these games well, yet you never underestimate the lethal stakes. Amid the swirling politics and clinking armor, you feel the weight of history pressing down. You are not just a man on horseback, but a symbol, the hope of a fractured realm. The crown you seek is more than gold and jewels. It's the promise of unity in a tangled web of loyalties and grudges. And yet, beneath the steel and ceremony, in you harbor a secret, a longing to be more than just a ruler, a scholar, a philosopher, a maker of peace in a war-torn world. As you approach the cathedral where your fate will be sealed, a chill runs down your spine, not from the cold, but from the enormity of what's to come. Because in this game, you probably won't survive the politics intact. But legends, they always find a way. The grand cathedral looms ahead, its soaring spires piercing the pale sky like the ambitions swirling in your mind. The heavy oak doors creak open, revealing a mosaic of gold, stone, and flickering candlelight. You step inside, your polished boots echoing on the marble floor as dozens of nobles and clergy fix their eyes on you, some with reverence, others with barely concealed contempt. Today, you are to be crowned Holy Roman Emperor, a title both glorious and cursed, laden with promises that can never fully be kept. The Archbishop prepares the crown, its weight symbolic but real. You feel the cold metal brush your brow, and a surge of pride mixes with the nagging uncertainty that has followed you since birth. Historians still argue whether your coronation marked the true beginning of your rule, or simply another ceremonial piece in the grand puzzle of empire. The German princes murmur beneath their breaths, and the Pope, distant but decisive, watches with hawk eyes. Their grudges will not melt with gold or ceremony. Outside, the city swells with excitement and anxiety. Merchants hawk their wares. Street performers juggle flaming torches, and the scent of roasted meats mingles with the dust kicked up by hooves. The common folk glance upwards, wondering if this bearded man crowned today can truly bring peace to their fractured world, or if he is just another knight chasing ghosts. Your mind flickers to the curious custom. You insist on carrying a carved wooden lion as your emblem, a symbol of courage and fierce independence. Some nobles scoff, others secretly admire the boldness. It's a touch of your personality, amidst the pomp and ceremony, a reminder that beneath the crown beats a restless heart. During the feast that follows, you savor spiced wine and roasted boar, while court jesters attempt to lighten the mood with bawdy tales. You grin despite yourself, thinking that perhaps humor is one weapon you wield better than a sword. But no celebration lasts forever. The whispers of rebellion already snake through the taverns and council chambers. Your grasp on the empire feels like sand slipping, elusive. You remind yourself that ruling is less about power held and more about power constantly fought for. Hostile. As the night deepens and the candles gutter low, you allow yourself a moment's quiet hope that this crown may yet be the first step toward a legacy that outlives the turmoil. Though, between you and me, you probably won't survive the next decade's storms unscathed. The dawn breaks cold and grey over your sprawling estates, a quiet that belies the storms brewing beneath the surface. You trudge through morning mists, armor clinking softly, as you prepare to confront the endless challenges that come with holding an empire together. The German princes, ever restive, scheme in shadowed halls and whispered councils, their loyalties as fickle as the wind. Your name commands respect, yes, but also envy and fear. To some, you are a unifier. To others, a tyrant bent on consolidating power. The delicate balance you try to maintain feels like walking a razor's edge. One misstep, and the whole realm could erupt into chaos. Historians still argue whether your policies strengthened the empire or hastened its fragmentation. But one thing is clear, your reign was never dull. You introduced legal reforms meant to centralize authority, issuing decrees that ripple through towns and castles, often met with grumbles or outright rebellion. You believe in law as the spine of empire, yet bending unruly nobles to your will is an art form that tests your patience daily. Among your more eccentric measures is the establishment of imperial courts, staffed by jurists who speak Latin with scholarly precision, a far cry from the gruff knights you command in battle. This blend of sword and scroll is uniquely yours, a symbol of the scholar-warrior identity you embrace. Some laugh behind your back, imagining you buried under dusty tomes rather than charging into battle. Your temper, meanwhile, remain legendary. A minor insult from a rival prince once saw you throwing a goblet across a banquet hall, shattering not only glass, but several delicate alliances. Frederick's fury is as fierce as his beard. Courtier joke nervously. Yet, amid the political machinations, you find solace in poetry and science, commissioning translations of Arabic texts and fostering debates on philosophy. This side of you puzzles many. How can a man who orders siege engines also quote Aristotle with ease as the sun climbs higher? You ready your steed, knowing the day will demand diplomacy, strategy, and perhaps another show of force. Your empire wet fractured, fierce, but still bound by the dream only you seem able to chase. The court buzzes with whispers as you unfurl your latest decree, a bold stroke aimed at clarifying the tangled web of feudal rights that tie your empire together. You envision a realm where every lord, bishop, and merchant knows exactly where they stand under imperial law, where disputes are settled not by sword but by scroll. The parchment crackles in your hands, a symbol of order amid chaos. Yet, reality bites harder. Many nobles treat your reforms like a curious nuisance, resisting any change that chips away at their age-old privileges. You find yourself locked in endless negotiations, your carefully crafted laws twisted or ignored. Some say your vision is ahead of its time. Others grumble that you're meddling in traditions best left untouched. A quirky tidbit: you once held a public trial where a noble's hawk was accused of attacking a commoner's chicken proof. You declare that justice extends even to the feathered aristocracy. Court jesters couldn't resist turning this into a running joke. But the incident underscores your unique approach to rulership. Historians still debate whether your legal reforms laid the groundwork for modern governance, or merely stirred more unrest in an already volatile empire. Either way, your name becomes synonymous with law and order, or, depending on who you ask, law and annoyance. Behind the scenes, advisors and scholars debate heatedly over the exact wording of your statutes, some arguing you aim too high, others praising your audacity. You listen, often silently, weighing their words like a general plots his next campaign. Meanwhile, your personal library swells with rare manuscripts, gifts from distant courts, and scribes labor over illuminated codices that capture your legacy in gold and ink. It's a quiet rebellion against the chaos, proof that knowledge might just be as powerful as the sword. As dusk falls, you pore over letters from Italian city-states, where loyalty is as fleeting as the evening breeze. Tomorrow, you'll have to remind them why the emperor's word is law, whether they like it or not. The heavy scent of cedarwood and burning tallow fills the dim chapel where you stand beside Beatrice, your bride, a woman whose grace and sharp mind promise both alliance and intrigue. The flicker of candlelight dances over the richly embroidered silk of her gown, while your own crimson cloak drapes heavily across your shoulders, symbols of power sewn into every thread. Marriage in your world is less about love and more about chess. Beatrice brings with her the wealthy lands of Burgundy, a prized jewel that bolsters your holdings and sends a clear message to rival nobles. You're not just a scholar or warrior, you're a dynasty in the making. Her sharp eyes meet yours briefly, a silent pact forged amid the solemn vows and hushed prayers. Historians still debate whether your union truly strengthened your rule, or simply tangled your loyalties in a web of competing interests. It's a question you ignore, as the feast erupts outside with clinking goblets, bawdy songs, and the murmur of alliances whispered beneath the noise. Your court is alive with excitement and cautious hope. As noble guests size up this new chapter, you can't help but notice a few raised eyebrows when you insist on exchanging gifts, a rare book on chivalry for Beatrice, a finely wrought falcon's hood from her, both tokens heavy with meaning. Among the lighter moments, a jester's joke about two rulers in one castle earns a nervous laugh. But you see the truth behind the humor. Power sharing is an art, and sometimes a trap. Later, as the revelry fades, you find yourself alone with your thoughts, contemplating the strange balance of love, politics, and power that marriage brings. It's a gamble, but then again, so is everything about ruling an empire that stretches from icy mountains to sun-drenched valleys. You trace the faint golden embroidery on Beatrice's sleeve and realize in this game, every thread counts. You mount your horse, the leather saddle creaking under your weight as your eyes sweep the horizon where the Alps loom like silent sentinels. Italy calls once more, its cities boiling with rebellion, its streets paved with both opportunity and danger. The air tastes sharp with anticipation, a bitter mix of ambition and uncertainty. Your army assembles with the clatter of armor and murmurs of soldiers, eager for glory or simply a paycheck. You know that marching south is never just about conquest. It's about reminding restless states that the emperor's shadow stretches far and wide. Yet, beneath your steely gaze, there's a flicker of weariness. Years of campaigns weigh heavier than any armor. Historians still argue whether your repeated Italian expeditions drained the empire's strength or were necessary to maintain its fragile unity. You don't have time for debates now. There are banners to raise and lines to cross. Among your retinue is a peculiar figure, an alchemist with strange potions and odd gadgets. rumored to be experimenting with early gunpowder. Soldiers eye him nervously, but you indulge the man's eccentricities. Intrigued by the possibility of new warfare, the journey over the Alps is brutal. Snow crunches underfoot. Icy winds bite through cloaks. And the narrow passes test your leadership as much as the enemy does. Yet, you press forward, your mind shifting between battle plans and poetry, the odd contrast defining your reign. At night, around flickering campfires, your men swap stories, some grand, some grim, but all a reminder that beneath the legend, you're just a man, riding hard toward destiny. You arrive in Italy's patchwork of city-states, where cobbled streets bustle with merchants hawking spices and silk, and church bells toll above narrow alleyways. The air hums with tension. Your presence is both a promise and a threat. Each city you approach hides a mix of hope, fear, and simmering rebellion beneath its sunlit facades. Your clash with Pope Innocent III soon becomes a battle, not just of armies but of ideas and authority. The spiritual weight of the papacy challenges your claim to secular power, and every word exchanged feels like a chess move in a game with stakes far beyond the battlefield. Historians still debate whether your conflicts with the papacy marked a tragic clash of titans or an inevitable collision of medieval politics and religion. You, however, see it simply as the price of ruling two worlds that refuse to coexist peacefully. Quirky fact: during one heated debate, you reportedly challenged the Pope to a duel, though whether it was serious or jest remains a mystery, sparking many a late-night scholar's smile. Your court wrestles with this spiritual tug-of-war, while you juggle military campaigns and delicate negotiations. Letters fly back and forth like arrows, each missive a mix of threats, promises, and theological jargon that would make any modern diplomat weep. At times, you find respite in your personal studies reading Aristotle by candlelight, or composing poetry that hints at a longing for peace amid chaos. But the conflict with the church lingers, a shadow stretching long over your reign. As you prepare for another march, the weight of crown and cross presses heavier than ever. Backed into a corner by Pope Innocent III's stubborn resistance, you decide to play a risky hand, crowning your own anti-pope, a man named Victor IV. The court gasps, and even your closest advisors wince. But you're convinced that installing a rival pontiff might just tilt the scales in your favor, or at least shake things up. The streets buzz with whispers. Some nobles cheer the bold move, while others worry you're dragging Christendom into a mess only a fool or a madman could clean up. Historians still argue whether this anti-pope gambit was a brilliant power play or a catastrophic misstep that deepened divisions. Your campfire conversations reveal an odd side of medieval politics, alliances made and broken, with little more than a nod or a promise wrapped in gold. You chuckle quietly when your jester quips, "Two popes, twice the prayers, double the headaches." Oddly, despite the political chaos, your interest in science and law doesn't waver. You commission new translations of Arabic texts on medicine and philosophy, hoping knowledge might outlast these messy power struggles. Meanwhile, the schism sows confusion among your subjects, priests refusing to preach, bishops arguing over allegiance, and common folk unsure whose prayers will reach heaven. You shrug at the turmoil. Ruling isn't clean, and peace rarely tastes sweet. As you prepare for another campaign, you ponder if this gamble for spiritual dominance will ever pay off, or just burn everything to ashes. The army camps near the marshy plains of northern Italy, thick with mud and the stench of damp earth, where disease lurks as deadly as any enemy sword. Fever sweeps through your ranks. A silent assassin stealing men faster than battles ever could. You taste the metallic tang of worry with each breath, knowing half your soldiers might never return home. Defeat stings bitterly when city after city resists. Their walls stronger than your siege engines and spirits defiant as mountain peaks. Your brilliant strategies sometimes falter under the weight of illness and betrayal, reminding you that fate is a fickle ally. Historians still argue whether your failures here were due to tactical errors or just the cruel luck of medieval warfare's harsh realities. You can only grit your teeth and press on, a stubborn lion refusing to surrender his throne. A fringe tidbit rumor has it you tried using medicinal leeches and exotic herbs brought by your court physician from the far reaches of Sicily to combat the plague. Though results were dubious at best, your men joked it was as effective as throwing garlic at a dragon. Through the bleak nights, you cling to the flickering hope of victory, the memory of brighter days, like your wedding with Beatrice, and the belief that empires, like people, sometimes must endure storms before the sun breaks through. You sip weak broth, eyes heavy, but burning with resolve, because surrender is simply not in your nature. You pivot from battlefield to blueprint, channeling your frustration into building castles, roads, and fortified cities that whisper power more than shout it. Your vision is clear if hearts won't bend. Stone and mortar might do the job. Thick walls crowned with battlements rise like giants guarding the empire's spine. Coins minted under your name jingle in pockets from Aachen to Palermo, spreading your image like a shadow creeping over Europe. The red beard on the silver shines, not just as currency, but as a symbol fear and respect rolled into one. Historians still debate whether your architectural spree was a legacy-building masterstroke or an expensive distraction from governance. But you see it plainly. Power must be visible, tangible, and unyielding. Quirky fact: you reportedly commissioned a mechanical clock that ticked like a heartbeat. A marvel that baffled your court and terrified superstitious peasants who whispered of time's magic. Late nights find you poring over plans, a ruler turned architect, sketching battlements by candlelight, dreaming of fortresses as unbreakable as your will. You know these stones may outlast your reign, telling future generations tales of a fiery emperor who built an empire one fortress at a time. You convene the Diet at Roncaglia, summoning scholars and nobles into a grand hall, echoing with murmurs and shuffling scrolls. The air is thick with anticipation, and the scent of wax seals as you unveil laws designed to bind your scattered empire tighter than ever before. Your iron justice is as sharp as your famed beard, meting out rules with the precision of a master swordsman. Yet, not all nobles and city leaders swallow your decrees without a grimace or a grumble. The balance between imperial power and local autonomy teeters precariously. Historians still argue whether the Roncaglia laws represented progress toward unity or simply sparked more resistance from proud Italian communes. Meanwhile, you wear your crown like armor, knowing that law is as much a weapon as any sword. A quirky tidbit: a scribe at Roncaglia is said to have used an early form of shorthand, a medieval text speak that left many of his peers baffled and muttering about sorcery. You watch the city leaders exchange wary glances, realizing that your vision for empire may need more than scrolls and seals. It needs hearts as steadfast as your own. The cities of Lombardy rise like a tide against you, their walls shimmering gold in the autumn sun, as merchants and militia swear an unbreakable league. You trudge through mud and marble alike, facing a coalition armed with maps, grudges, and the fierce pride of independence. Their banners flutter defiantly, and you can almost hear their laughter. No emperor, no matter how fiery his beard, You can simply march in and take what's not freely given. You sharpen your sword and your wits alike. Knowing diplomacy alone won't quell this storm. Historians still debate whether the Lombard League's rise marked the true beginning of urban autonomy, or was just a blip in the ever-shifting power game of medieval Italy. An odd detail, the League reportedly used carrier pigeons to send messages between cities, a medieval text message system that could make your modern smartphone jealous. You feel the weight of centuries on your shoulders, realizing that uniting these proud city-states under one crown will require more than force. It will require patience, cunning, and perhaps a touch of luck. Artigliano. The clash shatters your confidence, as peasants wield carts and pitchforks like weapons of legend, turning your well-trained knight's charge into chaos. You feel the ground tremble beneath the cries of foot soldiers who defy the Empire's might with sheer grit and determination. The smell of sweat, dust, and burning wood fills your nostrils as your forces are pushed back. Stunned by the unexpected resilience of these common folk, the battle becomes a harsh reminder that power isn't only forged in gilded halls, but also in the hearts of those who fight for their homes. Historians still argue whether Legnano was a true turning point in medieval warfare, or an isolated event of rebellious spirit, overcoming brute strength. The story of peasants punching back echoes through time, inspiring future generations more than you ever anticipated. A quirky snippet, it said, "Some of your knights blamed a swarm of angry bees released by villagers for their defeat," adding a touch of insect warfare to the legend. You sit beneath your tent later, brushing dirt from your armor, contemplating how the Empire's might can falter, not just against armies, but against unity born of desperation. You meet the Pope in Venice, the salty air of the lagoon swirling around the Grand Palazzo where awkward diplomacy unfolds like a slow dance on fragile ice. The handshake feels less like reconciliation and more like a tense truce held together by mutual exhaustion and political necessity. Your eyes scan the opulent chambers, filled with tapestries and gilded saints. Reminders that faith and power are entangled in a dance as old as Christendom itself. Neither of you fully trusts the other, but both crave peace enough to set down swords, if only for a moment. Historians still debate whether the Peace of Venice marked a genuine thaw, or merely a strategic pause in the ongoing tug-of-war between Emperor and Pope. The deal is fragile, a handshake that could slip away with the next breath of wind. A quirky side note, Venetian merchants reportedly sold special peace tokens during the negotiations, small charms said to bring luck and ward off papal curses. You sip a bitter wine, wondering how many more handshakes will be needed before this empire finds its balance, or if the dance will continue long after you're gone. Your family's hearth flickers with shadows of rivalry as you juggle heirs and alliances like a seasoned performer at court. The throne's promise weighs heavy when cousins and siblings plot beneath the same roof, each dreaming of power, each ready to unsettle the fragile peace you've fought so hard to maintain. You watch as marriages weave alliances and betrayals, banners raised and dropped like flags in a tempest. The warmth of family dinners hides whispered schemes and tense glances, a reminder that blood can both bind and break empires. Historians still debate whether Frederick II's family dynamics fueled his empire's strength, or seeded its eventual unraveling. Family was a battlefield, almost as fierce as any war you waged in the field. A quirky tidbit, your court jesters reportedly kept detailed gossip logs, scribbled diaries full of scandal that would make today's tabloids blush. You sit beside the hearth, feeling the paradox of love and war burn quietly in the same flame, knowing that ruling means mastering both sword and kin. The empire settles into a strange quiet, a decade where swords rest but pens scratch fiercely, You lean into town charters and coin reforms, scribbling laws and minting currency that promise stability but feel like whispers against the thunder of past battles. You stroll through city markets, the scent of fresh bread mingling with the metallic clang of the mint, knowing that empire building isn't always about grand gestures. It's often about the small, tedious grind of governance. Historians still argue whether this quiet decade was a golden age of reform or just a calm before the storm, a pause that delayed inevitable upheavals. A quirky fact: you're rumored to have outlawed the use of crocodile dung as sunscreen, apparently. Not all medieval beauty hacks were winners. You watch as the coins pass hands, the laws inked on parchments, the empire humming quietly beneath the surface, proving that sometimes power is built in silence. Brunswick burns with tension as you face down your cousin Henry the Lion, a tempest in human form who refuses to bow. You feel the old rivalries crackling like wildfire, threatening to consume everything you've built with their furious heat. The clash is more than family drama. It's a battle for the soul of the empire, where loyalty is tested and swords are sharpened in the fires of personal ambition. Historians still debate whether this feud was a political necessity or a tragic squabble that weakened your reign. A quirky note: Henry reportedly kept a pet lion, which he paraded around court like a furry declaration of defiance. You tighten your grip on your sword, realizing that even blood ties can be as dangerous as any enemy's blade. Jerusalem calls you like a distant drumbeat, stirring your warrior heart with visions of holy glory and dusty crusader paths. You answer that call, packing armor and prayers alike, ready to etch your name in the ancient sands where kings and prophets once walked. You trudge alongside knights and nobles, the smell of campfires mixing with the sharp tang of salt air as your fleet sails toward the Levant. The promise of a crusade burning bright, despite the uncertainty ahead. Historians still argue whether your crusade was fueled more by piety or politics, a holy war or a quest for legacy. A quirky tidbit: you reportedly brought exotic falcons to the crusade, both for hunting and as a regal status symbol that puzzled local rulers. You feel the weight of centuries on your shoulders as the horizon blurs into a hazy promise of conquest, faith, and perhaps final reckoning. You lead your grand army across Europe, a shimmering tide of mail and banners, the clatter of hooves echoing like thunder across valleys and plains. The air is thick with anticipation and the scent of freshly turned earth as peasants and nobles alike watch the emperor's passage with a mixture of awe and dread. Your commanders exchange whispered strategies under the canopy of ancient forests, while you ride at the front, feeling the weight of history and myth pressing down with every mile. Historians still debate whether your crusading army was as mighty as legends claim, or if dust and rumor inflated its grandeur over time. A quirky note: soldiers reportedly sang bawdy songs about your famously red beard, making you an unlikely folk hero, even among the ranks. As twilight falls, you pause to gaze at the stars, wondering if the heavens will bless this final journey or conspire against it. One morning, you dismount for a swim in the warm waters of the Salef River, the sun casting ripples like liquid gold across your armor. The soldiers watch, some uneasy, others distracted by the distant horizon, unaware this peaceful moment will be your last. You wade deeper, in the cool water, a sharp contrast to the heat of the Crusade's dust and sunburn, feeling for a brief second the simple joy of water against skin. Then, suddenly, you vanish beneath the surface, swallowed by silence. Historians still argue whether your death was an accident, a sudden illness, or something more mysterious, shrouded in the fog of legend. A quirky, haunting detail. Local tales tell of fish glowing strangely near the spot where you drowned, as if the river itself mourned the emperor's fall. Your army pauses, a stunned silence rippling through the camp. No one knows how to follow a leader who's slipped away so quietly, leaving only questions and a legacy. Your body becomes a patchwork of legend and logistics, divided between lands as distant as your empire's reach. Bones sealed in barrels, scattered across cities that once bent or refused to your will. Your physical self fragments, while your myth grows whole. You watch from beyond as pilgrims trek to your tombs, tracing stories embroidered with gold and shadow, tales of miracles, curses, and emperors who would not rest. Each shrine adds layers to your legend, blurring the line between man and myth. Historians still debate whether this scattering of remains was practical or symbolic, a final political statement or an afterlife gamble. Quirky fact: one of your supposed burial sites claims you were buried alongside a collection of falcons, a nod to your love of hunting and regal spectacle. Your legacy, like those bones, stretches across borders and centuries, becoming less about flesh and more about the stories we tell when the fires dim. Your red beard becomes more than a physical trait. It transforms into a symbol, a fiery emblem that outlives kingdoms and centuries. From mountain legends whispered in the Alps to the twisted propaganda of much darker times, you become a ghostly presence, haunting history's pages. You feel the weight of stories reshaped by ambition and fear, where truth is tangled with invention, and your image is wielded as much as your sword once was. This beard, once a personal boast, now blazes through folklore and ideology alike. Historians still argue how much of your legend was crafted by your enemies, your admirers, or simply by the passage of time, turning flesh into myth. A quirky note: some folk tales claim your beard glowed in battle, a fiery halo that unnerved foes and enchanted followers, probably just smoke and light. But hey, medieval PR worked differently. You drift through centuries, a fiery ghost whose real story sometimes feels just out of reach, flickering between man and myth. As your story settles into legend, you're left with the quiet question that lingers like a shadow. At the end of a long day, did you ever truly rule? You wrestled empires and popes, fought battles across continents, yet the unity you dreamed of slipped like sand through your fingers. You feel the bittersweet pulse of a life lived on the knife edge, between triumph and frustration, where every crown weighed heavy with compromise, and every victory whispered of new challenges. Historians still debate whether your empire was a unified kingdom or a patchwork of temporary alliances held together by force and faith. Quirky detail: some say your spirit lingers in the forests and mountains you once roamed, a restless emperor who still chases the elusive dream of unity. Now, as you sink into the quiet night, the roar of battle fades, replaced by a gentle hush, like a long sigh of history itself, finally settling. Word count 1, 102, 300, word wind, down now. Slow your breathing. Feel the rhythm of the night wrapping around you like a soft cloak. Imagine the fading glow of campfires on distant hills, the whisper of wind through ancient trees, and the gentle pulse of a world that keeps turning long after emperors fall. There's a strange comfort in the story of a man who reached for the stars, but found the horizon always just beyond his grasp. His dreams were grand, his struggles immense, and in that tension, something timeless glimmers. Remember the flicker of candlelight on cold stone walls. The clang of distant swords turned to silence, and the heavy crowns set aside for rest. The past is never truly gone. It lingers in echoes, in shadows, and in the stories we tell when the world grows quiet. So, let your thoughts drift like leaves on a slow river, and carry with you the quiet strength of a legacy that never truly ends. Sleep well, knowing history is a story that never stops unfolding, and you've just glimpsed one of its most restless chapters.